Right. So if you could talk to 22-year-old Travis Stevens, what would you say to yourself, or what would you possibly have changed?
You know, it's funny because I was fighting for Ravensburg in Europe and we were at a team dinner and Nuno Delgado was there just as like a guy who used to compete for the team. And he was sitting across the table and he goes, the number one thing I would tell like a younger self, you get better through rest. You get better through rest. And a lot of times younger athletes feel like the harder you do things, the more tired you can get yourself, the better you're going to get. But really it's about those short bursts of energies, right? Not the 5 sessions a day, not the 7 sessions a day, but it's really what you do in those like hour and a half of the training session. If you're going past that, you're into a realm of you are holding back. And every country and every system is a little bit different. But for me, I would have focused on 100% energy for that hour and a half, and then trying to get back to my 100% as quick as possible to start my next judo session. Where before, like, you know, you would train as hard as you can, but then you'd start to recover up to like 60, 70%, and then you get restless. Right. And then you're like, I'm going to go for a run. And now you're at 80% and you drop it to 70, and then you go into that night session and you're not really getting the judo that you need because you're a little fatigued, you're a little sore, your throws aren't as clean. And then when you try to compete, it really plays that part of you're not 100%.
Right. I can relate to what you're saying because I can look back on my career and it always seemed that it wasn't just me, but it's the culture of our sport, you know, especially during maybe my era where it was like everything was about harder, faster, more. Every time I went to the dojo, I was trying to be the toughest guy on the mat. And I wasn't, you know, look, if I asked myself, what would I change in my judo career? It would be something like, you know, slow down. And like, just because you're 25 doesn't mean you can't learn a new trick. But I would go in there every single night, wherever I was at, whether it was in Japan or at San Jose State. And I was going to try to be the best, the best, toughest guy in the room that night because I thought that's what I needed. But clearly, when I was training at the very end of my career, I was like you. I was in my early 30s, but I couldn't train the way I could when I was in my early 20s. But I was still trying to, and I was getting beat up, trying to do 2-hour sessions 5 nights a week. And I look back, I'm like, I wish I would have just slowed down, put a little bit more thought into my judo, possibly made some major changes or minor changes that could make a major impact, possibly.
Yeah, and for us, from 2012 to 2016, I actually did less judo at home, more judo overseas. But when I was at home, I was actually teaching judo twice a week. So I got to actually get my mind going and actually think about like, what resources do I need? What grips do I need? What positions do I need in order to get these attacks to work? And how do I know this well enough to convey it to the younger generation? And that's getting my mind working. Like I'm engaged, I'm physically going, like I'm training. I may not have that physical output, but my mind is going, right? So it's actually fighting these matches in my head because I've got to think like, what's my right hand actually doing? So many athletes today, they just like, I do this. And then you're like, but there's so much more to that. You know, like where your elbow is under your wrist matters. Like, is your wrist bent? Is it cocked towards you? Is it cocked behind you? Like, do you curl it in for sail? Like, it matters. And when you look at the Japanese players, like you'll see coaches when you're there, like they'll adjust their athletes and like pinpoint like where things need to be because they're paying attention to the details. Right. We're so focused as like the actual outcome of the throw being correct. And we don't think to ourselves, well, my training partner is helping me. But like, what do I really need structurally within my body in relationship to my opponent to actually get this stuff to work in a competitive mindset? Once you start thinking like that, you can actually replicate with anybody, like the actual key areas and points you need for certain judo techniques.